All right, let's jump right in. I want you to imagine it's early 2026. All around the world, you've got these major crises popping off, seemingly out of nowhere and totally unrelated. But what if they're not separate at all? What if what we're looking at is actually a masterclass in strategic thinking? You know, like a massive geopolitical chess game where every single move was planned way ahead of time.
So, the whole thing kicks off on February 28th. A U.S.-Israeli strike hits Iran. And according to the sources we're looking at, the main goal was pretty clear: dismantle the Iranian regime and its network of proxies in the region. But Iran, well, they didn't just sit back. Their response was fast, it was dramatic, and it was aimed squarely at the world's energy jugular. And boom, here's what happened next. Iran makes this incredibly bold countermove. They slam the Strait of Hormuz shut, one of the most critical oil passages on the entire planet. And we're not talking about just a threat here. They were actively targeting tankers. The flow of oil just stopped. And you can bet the economic shockwaves hit almost immediately.
Okay, take a look at the sheer scale of this impact. According to data from Lloyd's, traffic through that strait just cratered. It dropped by 80% in a matter of days. And the market? It freaked out instantly. You can see it right here on this graph. Oil prices shot up from the 70s to a peak of $119 a barrel. I mean, that's a classic supply shock. Normally, something like that would send entire economies into a complete tailspin. Which brings us to the real mystery here. You've got global markets in absolute chaos. Oil prices are going through the roof. You'd expect total panic, right? Especially for Americans at the gas pump. But that's not what happened. So the big question is, how was the U.S. so protected from a crisis that honestly seemed tailor-made to bring it to its knees?
To figure that out, the analysis we're digging into says we need to flip the script. We have to stop looking at this stuff in the order it happened and start working our way backwards. Because weeks before that first strike on Iran, another really critical move had already been played. A move that basically set the stage for everything that was about to come.
And this was it. This was that earlier move. We're talking January 2026, weeks before anything happened with Iran. Suddenly all eyes are on America's own backyard, Venezuela. And this wasn't some minor detail, not a side plot. According to this analysis, this was the absolute cornerstone of the entire strategy.
So how do they pull it off? Well, the sources lay out what sounds like a textbook three-step playbook. Step 1, U.S. forces reportedly take President Maduro into custody. Step 2, the new interim government gets, let's say, encouraged to completely overhaul the country's oil laws. And then, Step 3, that change opens the floodgates for American companies like Chevron and Exxon to pour billions in, crank up production, and lock down a vital news source of oil flowing straight to the U.S.
And you can just see the ripple effects from this one move. For the U.S., the payoff was huge and immediate. We're talking control of something like 30 to 50 million barrels of oil. And the whole thing was legally justified by billions in international court judgments that were already on the books against Venezuela. But for a country like Cuba, a key ally of Venezuela, the impact was, well, devastating. Their lifeline of cheap oil was just cut off, overnight. And that led directly to massive fuel shortages and blackouts across the island.
Now, getting that Venezuelan oil was a big deal, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. The other, equally important pillar of this strategy was being built right here at home. The goal? To turn the United States into, basically, an impenetrable energy fortress. Just look at this number, 13.6 million. That's how many barrels of oil the U.S. was pumping out per day by the end of the previous year, a new record high. This enormous domestic supply was the ultimate shock absorber. It just soaked up the impact from the Hormuz shutdown and kept the American economy chugging along nice and stable.
And you know, this wasn't an accident. It didn't just happen. The sources we're looking at point to a whole series of specific policies that made this possible. Things like a 55% jump in federal drilling permits, opening up brand new drilling spots in Alaska, and giving the green light to way more LNG exports. So what was the result for the average person? All that chaos on the global market, it was barely a blip on the radar at their local gas pump.
Okay, so let's recap. The U.S. has its own energy supply totally locked down. You've got domestic production booming, and now you've got this new source from Venezuela. So what happens next? Well, now the U.S. can really start to leverage the crisis. Suddenly, the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz isn't just a problem, it's a weapon, a tool to put a massive economic squeeze on its biggest rivals.
And this table really breaks down how it hit that Iran, Russia, China axis. So first, Iran. By shutting down Hormuz, their main source of oil money is just gone. They're starved for cash. Then there's Russia. The crackdown on black market oil directly chokes off their war funding. And then you have China, which was getting a great deal on oil from both Iran and Russia. Suddenly, that cheap energy supply is cut, leaving them in a really tough spot.
Let's zero in on China for a second, because the impact there was huge. This chart really shows you the gaping hole that was just blown in their energy supply chain. You add up the lost oil from Iran and Venezuela, and you're looking at a 17% chunk of their total imports. Gone. For the second biggest economy in the world, that is a massive, massive problem.
But the squeeze didn't end there, not by a long shot. The analysis points to another really clever move, a major crackdown on what they call the shadow fleet. These are all the sanctions-dodging tankers that Russia and others were using to move oil on the sly. So by grabbing ships like the Marinera, a Russian-flagged tanker, the U.S. started to pull apart the entire black market system that was keeping its rivals afloat.
So when you step back and look at all the pieces on the board, you've got the setup in Venezuela, the energy boom back home, and then the perfectly timed shutdown of the Strait. The sources we're examining argue that a really clear picture starts to form. This wasn't just a bunch of random reactions to events. No, this was the execution of a single, brilliant, strategic vision.
Right. The core idea here is that this was chess, not checkers. Every single move was deliberate, designed to set up the next one. It's like securing a powerful new piece in Venezuela before you make a sacrifice to block a key part of the board, all while making sure your own position is totally secure. When you look at it that way, it completely reframes how you see the whole series of events.
And this quote from one of the sources really drives home just how significant this analysis is. The suggestion is that this kind of thinking, where you can see the small tactical moves and the giant global strategic picture at the same time, is incredibly rare. I mean, they're drawing a direct line to figures like Washington, Lincoln, and FDR. That's a huge claim, right? It's basically saying these moves could be historically significant.
So, all of this leaves us with one big, fascinating question. If everything we've just talked about were just the opening moves in a much, much bigger game, and if this grand strategy is real, then you have to wonder, what comes next? The board has been completely reset, seemingly in America's favor. So, what's the next move?